Hey, this is Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Today, I'll be showing you how to install a Tusk winch on a Polaris RZR XP 1000. A winch is one of the most basic upgrades that you can do and one of the best. At some point in time, you'll probably get stuck out on the trail, so think of it as an insurance policy to help get you back to the truck. This winch is available separately with a roller fair lead or in a kit with a model-specific mounting plate. The winch is a 3,500 pound unit and it comes with a synthetic rope in 50 feet of length, the wiring, the switch, and mounting hardware that you'll need to install it. And another great feature, it has a clutch knob so you can easily engage and disengage the rope. Now that we've covered the basics, let's go ahead and get started. To do this job, we chose to use several different products from Tusk, starting with the winch kit, a rocker switch, and a Tusk rubber stop. Also, you'll need some zip ties, some basic hand tools, wire strippers, rags, safety glasses, and depending on how you want to mount your contactor, we will need some hardware to mount that up. For this specific machine, we actually opted to use some screws from Polaris because there's already some mounts for them in the machine. And we'll show you a little bit more about that later in the video. Before we begin the install, make sure you have read through the instructions that came with the kit to get familiar with the process and verify that you have all the correct parts. Before we begin the install, we'll want to make sure our ignition switch is turned off. Next, we'll remove the rear seat on the driver's side and disconnect the negative battery cable. Next, we'll remove the hood. A lot of machines will come with a power cable kit and bus bar, but if your machine doesn't have this, there is a kit available that you can run these cables from your battery up to the bus bar. We will be tying into this later on in the video. Next, we'll remove our winch cover. With that off, we're ready to remove all our hardware holding our front bumper, but we'll start by disconnecting all of our electrical connections, starting at the headlights. Following that, we'll remove the turn signals. Now we'll go ahead and remove all the screws from the front bumper. With all the screws out and electrical connections disconnected, we'll go ahead and pull the front bumper forward and off. Now we'll install the winch mounting plate from the driver's side. And keep in mind when you're installing this, we've got a lot of soft components around us. We've got the radiator, some hoses, and wiring. So be sure not to damage any of that and take your time when you're putting this in place. With our mounting plate in place, you'll notice that the differential vent hose is being pulled on a little bit, and you want to roll this around to the front of the plate and be mindful of it as you bolt the plate down that it's not pinched. You'll notice in your kit that it comes with several different size bolts. So we'll start with the carriage bolt that we'll use for the back of our mounting plate. First, we'll loosely mount all the bolts to the winch mounting plate and then torque them to spec. Next, we'll use our M10 bolts with the nylock nuts in the front of our mounting plate. Now that we have all the bolts loosely fitted, we'll go ahead and torque them to spec, starting with our M10 carriage bolt, which is 37 foot-pounds. Now we'll move to the M10 bolt in the front of the mounting bracket, and we'll tighten that to 37 foot-pounds as well. After that, we can use our M12 bolts on the top of our fair lead bracket. Next, we'll install our M8 bolts on the lower portion of our fair lead bracket. Next, we'll install the top fair lead mounting bracket bolts to 58 foot-pounds. Now we can tighten the M8 lower fair lead bracket mounting bolts to 18 foot-pounds. Now we'll install the winch from the driver's side, being careful not to damage the radiator or any hoses or wiring. Next, we'll install the 4 mounting bolts into the bottom of the winch through the mounting plate, and we'll torque those to 12 foot-pounds. Attach the fair lead to the mounting plate using the supplied bolts, washers, and nuts. Next, we'll put our clutch in the free spool position and pull the rope through our fair lead. With the rope pulled through, we'll install our Tusk rubber stop The rope might be a little difficult to pull through, so we're using this hook to help the process. This rubber bumper doesn't come in the kit, but we opted to use one because it's a nice accessory. It keeps the rope from being pulled in too far and preventing the hook from actually damaging the roller fair lead, and keeps that hook from bouncing around. And then install our hook onto the end of the rope, put the cotter pin through it, and be sure to bend the tabs down. Now we'll throw our pull tab on the end of the hook. The next thing we need to do is mount our contactor in a clean, dry location, and to do that, our machine actually came with 4 mounting holes down here on the front of the firewall. And if you're gonna mount this here, you'll need 4 screws to go in there. So we actually sourced 4 screws from Polaris, and we're adding a link to the end of the video to help you get those. So if your machine doesn't have those mounting holes already in the firewall, you'll need to find a different clean and dry location that's away from anywhere that could be susceptible to damage, like rocks flying up, sticks, branches, that kind of thing. Next, we'll install our contactor. First, we'll install the yellow and blue wires to our winch on the color-coded terminals, and then to our contactor, and be sure to match them with their color-coded terminals on the contactor as well. Now we'll take our red and black wires and run them from the contactor, matching the color coding on the terminals, and run them up to our bus bar. We use some pliers to bend our terminals going onto the bus, just to make sure they fit better and we don't have to put too much force on our nut going onto the bus bolt coming out, because if we do that, it will strip it out, and we want to make sure everything works good. When you hook up the ground cable, be sure to get the ground eyelet back onto the terminal with the cable. With all our cables loosely installed, we'll now go back through and tighten everything up. And we also want to tie everything down and make sure we're not rubbing on any moving parts or sharp edges. Always be careful when you're tightening the terminal nuts. They don't really need to be that tight. They just need to be snugged down, and that way we don't break or strip anything out. So this is the switch that came in our kit. If you want to use it, we found a few places you can mount it. This bar would be a good place, and you can have it right down here. I've also heard of people getting some longer screws and attaching it to this plastic right here. But like I mentioned earlier, we're going to use our Tusk rocker switch. So we'll go ahead, we're going to cut the ends off of our switch that came in the kit, and we'll attach it to this and mount it into the dash. Now we'll strip the wires back and attach our electrical connectors that came with our new switch. So to get these wires installed on the rocker switch, you'll notice on the bottom, each terminal, it's got a number next to it. And what you'll do, we'll hook up our black wire to the number 1 terminal, and we'll hook up the red wire to our number 2 terminal. And the red wire, this is our key on power. And then the green one, we will connect to the number 3 terminal. Next, we'll remove the plug in the dash and route our wiring next to existing wiring through the firewall and down to our contactor. We don't want to press this in yet because we want to make sure everything operates correctly before we install it. With everything loosely routed, we'll now put our eyelet on our red wire and install it to our accessory outlet on our bus connector. Now that we're all wired up, we'll reinstall our negative battery cable, check for proper operation, then we can install our switch into the dash and then tie down the wires and make sure they're away from moving parts and any sharp edges. Making sure the clutch knob on our winch is in the engaged position, we'll turn the ignition switch on and check the operation of our winch.
Stop.
Ours works good, but if you happen to mix up the wires, you can just pull them off and switch the locations. Now that we've verified that our switch works properly, we will snap it into place. When you go to do this, make sure the key is in the off position because you will be pressing on the rocker while you install it. Now we'll go ahead and put the grill back on. Now we'll go ahead and plug our headlights and blinkers back in. Next, we'll install our hood. Now we can install the rear driver's seat. And that's all there is to installing your Tusk Winch Kit. It's really that simple, and if you need any tips on rope replacement or winch maintenance, we do have a video on that, so check out our channel, and if you like that type of video, subscribe. Here at Rocky Mountain ATV MC, we have a huge selection of OEM and aftermarket parts that fit your UTV or pretty much any machine you'll have. So check that out. You get free shipping on orders over $75. Thanks for watching.